Good evening. Goeienaand. Dumelang bagaitsu, sanbonani bagiti. Another great day, another great evening, another great show. So good to have you with us tonight. As always, it is going to be an informing evening. From my side, welcome. As you can see, both pilots are here with you, and now it is the opportunity for you to hear from my co-pilot, Honorable Wayne Thring. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good to have you back. I'm glad that our president is back with us today. We missed him last week, and always good to have him with us as we discuss some key and pertinent issues within our country and also pertaining to the ACDP. I want to say again that we are at a critical juncture within the history of our country. And as we engage in matters pertaining to South Africa and the ACDP, we want to ask you to become involved. And if you are not a member of the ACDP, please find the nearest member or branch or office of the ACDP and become involved, because South Africa needs the ACDP and the ACDP needs you. And so again, welcome and thank you for joining us.
You know, today I got a request from Kimberley. A policeman called or sent a message, a WhatsApp message from Kimberley saying, I want to join the ACDP.
Fantastic.
He says, I'm involved, I'm not sure whether I should mention that, with another organization that is mobilizing Christians. And he said, I'm involved with them. But he said, I dissent something. That's why I want to join the ACDP, even though I am involved with them. So I'm saying this because of what you just said, that those who have not yet joined must find the nearest office or whoever can assist them to sign up and join part of the team that we believe God is going to use in these last days to turn this nation around. Let me maybe warn you. God does not bless deception.
No, sir.
For God to do what he wants to do in this nation, we must walk in truth, in honesty, in transparency, and let's not say to people, we are going to do this, we are not a political party, and then turn around the 11th hour, when in our heart of hearts, we know what you're doing. So beware that Jesus spoke about deceptions that will be there in the last days. All right? But let's hear how our members are greeting us and are joining us tonight. We have a good evening, President and Deputy, and all of your listeners, Joanne and Bernard in Durban North. Welcome, Bernard. And Corinne Ditleck says, good evening, all. She's saving words, okay? Shalom. We pray God's favor and wisdom over our meeting. Mario Bringit Bayadangi. Maria Lotta, good evening, all the way from Port Elizabeth. Putti, oh. Good evening, President, DP and ACDP family. Choshi from Limpopo. Kehai is home. Yes, sir. Marik Niethle. Marik Niethle. Good evening, family, all the way from Nelson Mandela Bay. Good evening, Marik. Cas van der Bijl Meth. Good evening, President and Deputy President, all the way from South Coast, Port Shepstone.
So glad to have Cass with us. And again, just want you to know that we've been praying for you and the family. As the ACDP, we care. And you and family have been in our hearts. And during your difficult time, we're so blessed that you could also join us. Shows your commitment to the ACDP and to the vision of the ACDP. So thank you so much, Kaz, for joining us. And again, just know that as the ACDP, we continue to pray for you and your family.
Rob from the Eastern Cape, he says, good evening from Rob Wade. Thank you so much for joining from Limpopo. Good evening, President and Deputy Khoyenand Lekker Omtekeyer from Limpopo and Waterberg. Khoyenand. Good evening, President DP and all the ACDP family nationwide. From Joseph Temlet. Shirel Regan Jacobs say, blessed evening, Honorable President, Deputy and ACDP family. Good evening, Mr. President and Deputy and all ACDP family. That's from Siboniso Twala.
Well, there we also have Christian Rolson, who says, good evening, Mr. President and ACDP family. Every blessings to you, Christian. We have Joy Peterson. Good morning, Mr. President and DP and ACDP members. Shalom. Joy Peterson, all the way from a very cool Cape Town.
He says good morning. He's greeting us from USA somewhere there.
Okay.
Mario Brink, we love our president and DP.
Bye, donkey. And then we have Moses Pui. Good evening, my president and DP. Good evening, Moses. And then we have Cranston, and that's Cranston Holland Ramsey. Good evening, Mr. President, Meshwe and DP Thring and ACDP family. Good evening, Cranston.
Nora Maliti Niko, all the way from Phosphorus. Good evening, Honorable President, Deputy President, and ACDP family. Good to be together again, and thank you all for the info we are getting.
Bonnie Bernardo, good evening, Mr. President and Deputy President. Looking forward to a special meeting. I know you're not going to be disappointed. Simo Gumedi, good evening, Honorable President and Deputy President. Simo, good evening, KZN.
Good evening, Mr. President, DP, and the beautiful ACDP family from Ntate, Raymond Tlaedi. Okay, sounds like all the greetings have been done, and we are delighted to be with you again tonight. Now, we want to have maybe the last two comments about this multi-party charter. We have direction, but we want to give you the last opportunity. If you have not said anything, you may. Otherwise, we are going to roll in. And tonight, we are going to focus on legislation or whatever has been done in Parliament that was influenced by ACDP members of Parliament. You are going to hear from my deputy, you are going to hear from me, you are going to hear from members of Parliament, Steve Swart and Maris Sukers. Now, obviously, when you hear all this, you should be knowing that if there was no ACDP, would this have happened? ACDP is definitely having an impact on legislation. Okay, before we start with that, let's hear from you. Two last people. If you're not there, we are starting to tell you about what we have done and to justify the position that we have taken. And I believe we also have heard from the Lord about this matter, but have your say lastly. Otherwise, we are going to start.
That's right, sir. The show is rolling, and so we've got to get talking as well. So
okay.
You've asked for some comments.
All right. Looks like there are no comments because time is moving fast. One of the things I said this past week was that you cannot want to be, okay, multi-party, that's totally so. He got the plane taxiing, he's jumping in the window. I don't know how he got that window open, but he did, all right? He says, if we join, will we be able to speak against the ills of other political parties within the multi-party agreement? That is the question.
Absolutely, yes. I think that every party maintains its independence. And so where there are challenges and where one party goes in a wrong direction, we maintain our dependence, our position, and speak against those political parties or political party, as we've always done.
Do you know it is God's plan for his people to be in governance, in government? It is God's will, actually, for his people, the obedient people, to be the head and not the tail in every society. It is never, and it was never God's plan. If you read your Bible carefully, from the first page to the last page, from Genesis to Revelation, you will not find a single verse where God said, darkness must lead light. The ungodly must lead the godly. The immoral must lead people with moral integrity. You will not find such a thing. The problem has been with the church that has been deceived. And obviously, we need to challenge churches that are still teaching that Christians should not be involved in politics. If you check carefully, whenever either Israel or Judah were led by the ungodly, people who didn't believe in God or were oppressed, always you'll discover that it was because of their rebellion. When they moved away from God, he gave them over to their enemies. But when they walked in obedience, you will not find a place where they were ruled by the rebels and the ungodly. And yet Christians today are happy to, so many of them, properly qualified people who are in the background, but they are putting the ungodly, who are not properly qualified in many instances, to be in the front. This has to change. This has to change. All right? That is why I believe it is the right thing to do, that Christians should influence and, where possible, change legislation. That's what we are planning to do this coming year, 2024. Okay? We must influence regulations. We must influence rules. We must influence laws that are made in the country. Do you remember during COVID, we were told not to go to church? Those were rules. Those were regulations. Don't go to church. And when you come to church, zip, close your mouth, don't sing, don't say anything, have an entertainer stand in front of you. You come to the scriptures, it says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord.
To the Lord.
Who made those regulations? The ungodly. They favored casinos. Even when casinos were allowed to operate with 2,000 people, the church was told only 50 people. Regulations and rules that are made by the ungodly. Do you think it was, if it was a Christian government, that would have happened? No, no, no. We make a joyful noise unto the Lord. So that's a classic example of what happens when Christians allow the ungodly to make regulations for them. They will tell you when to meet, how long to meet, and when not to meet. They dictate terms. That is wrong, friends. So if Steve, because he has load shedding, if he's still with us tonight, I'm going to ask him to be the first to tell us how his presence in Parliament, when rules, regulations, and laws were made, he made input that made the legislation better than it was without him. Okay, Steve, welcome, sir. I just see all darkness around you, but the light of God I see in you. So welcome.
Thank you, President and Deputy President and ACDP family. Arise, shine, your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Oh, deep darkness is around me. Our light shall shine. President, I feel embarrassed to go ahead of you, because you've led the way at Parliament, and I really trust that you're going to share about the Constitution and us not being a secular state. That is far more important than anything I could say, and I think that is very important, and I really trust that you're going to share that. But very briefly, it's been such an honor to be part of the ACDP at Parliament and to make a difference and to be salt and light. As the President has indicated, we are called to rule, And we know that when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people mourn. And I'm sure you'd all agree with me that South Africans are not rejoicing, they are mourning at the moment because of the laws that have been passed. So some of the laws that we've had an impact in, and I've been really honored to serve in the Justice Portfolio Committee. President, you know that justice and righteousness are the pillars of God's throne. And I think one of the most important ones is when one looks at your heroes of faith and those that have gone ahead of us, one person comes to mind, and that is William Wilberforce, who was known as God's politician. And he fought the evils of slavery. He introduced laws to change morality in society, which were remarkable. And he said that he challenged the community at the time, the society. He said, I call on all of you who are true Christians, boldly stand up for the cause of Christ in a time when those that are called by his name are ashamed of him. On your shoulders rests your country's fate. It is up to you to deliver your country. And I think the same applies to us at this stage. So why I'm thinking of William Wilberforce is one of the acts that we pushed as the ACDP was the prevention and combating of trafficking in human persons. And you remember in the run-up to 2010, there was a lot of talk about human trafficking in South Africa, and we'd already signed the Palermo Protocol, which is an international convention fighting slave trade across the world. We know that it's a very disgraceful, and it is still happening. Those of you that can see the Freedom film, please go and see it. But we've taken a very strong stance as the ACDP in this regard. What happened with 2010 with the Soccer World Cup was after the World Cup, because there was no spike in trafficking in South Africa, it was still happening, but it wasn't the expected increase. The ANC said they're not continuing with the legislation. And I insisted from the ACDP side, I said, we've signed this international protocol, we have to pass this legislation. And due to the ACDP being in the Justice Portfolio Committee, we were able to pass that legislation. And that, I thank Abba Father for the honor of being able to follow in the footsteps of William Wilberforce. A second quick one relates to the issue of sexual offenses in our nation. And we know it is rampant. And we played a very key role in the drafting of comprehensive legislation to fight. It was the sexual offenses bill to comprehensively redefine rape, redefine sexual offenses, increase sentences. And that was a very strategic piece of legislation that we played a key role in as well. And when we look at on the ground, issues that affect our people on the ground, such as domestic violence, such as maintenance, we've played a key role in enhancing the legislation, ensuring that those acts can be implemented. The last issue with legislation, President, is the Child Justice Act. I remember as a young prosecutor going to the prisons and cells and seeing these young children in prison, and it broke my heart. These are children that are not a danger to society, but because they were hungry, they would steal a loaf of bread. And then they'd be incarcerated, locked away, and be raped and abused in prison to a lifetime of crime. Now, the Bible teaches us about restoration. It teaches us in Exodus 21 about restitution. And so we pioneered the concept of restorative justice for children that are not a danger to society, but they can be diverted and be given a second chance. And that was successfully pushed through. It took a long time. After the ACDP was represented, we spoke at the United Nations ancillary meeting in 2000 on the concept of restorative justice when it comes to those that are not a danger to society. And we managed to change the legislation to introduce the Child Justice Act. And if we were able to keep one child out of jail who's not a danger to society and rehabilitated, we would have done well. And President, the last two quick issues, which has been a highlight of my ACDP involvement in Parliament, has of course been the Eskom inquiry, where the ACDP played a key role in cross-examining witnesses. And after much prayer, I said, Father, if I'm involved in this state capture corrupt inquiry, I want an hour, one-on-one with the top culprits of Eskom, and that was Brian Molefe, Mashili Koko, and Anoj Singh, that are all facing criminal charges. And I was able to cross-examine them for an hour. And it was quite remarkable. Mashili Koko, after an hour, he pleaded with the chairman, please protect me from the Maruti, the pastor, from the ACDP. And I said, yeah, you only need protection because you're not being truthful. Brian Molefe said, oh, you think you're very powerful. I said, Mr. Molefe, just answer the questions. Why are you deviating? And of course, Anoj Singh, I said, why should you not be declared a delinquent director? So that was key. But what the Lord showed us at that stage as well, that the money was going to start coming back. And during our cross-examination, one of the main culprits was McKinsey Management Consulting. And after a day of cross-examination by all parties, including the ACDP, they said they will repay 1 billion rand. That's 1,000 million rand. And that is as a result of the ACDP's involvement in those issues. So, President, it's been an honor and to serve as an ambassador of the Most High God in Parliament and to make a difference. But had we not been there, things would have been much different. With you as our leader, our visionary, setting the stage right from the word go to make sure that South Africa is not a secular state. I can't tell you how many times I've had to argue in the Constitutional Review Committee that South Africa is not a secular state because of what you did, President, when we drafted the Constitution. So I just want to honor you and thank you for being able to serve you and the Most High God in Parliament.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for your influence, for your participation in lawmaking in South Africa. If South African Christians in particular were honest enough, they would be saying, ACDP MPs, thank you very much for what you have done. Now, maybe let me say something about the Constitution because you referred a few times to that, and then I'll come to my colleague who also has nice, beautiful stories to tell. It is a fact. I don't understand, Steve, if people are still trying to argue with you in the Constitutional Review Committee. I don't understand what their problem is. The fact is, we are not a secular state. The ANC wanted those words, we are a secular state, in the Constitution. And those words are not there because of what we did as the ACDP. We were told by Professor Hugh Corder. Those days, he was still with the University of Cape Town. I'm not sure where he is today, but he was a professor of constitutional law at UCT. He said to us, after I asked the question, what would be the implications of having a constitution that states that we are a secular state? He said three things, or three of the other things would be, number one, there would be no reference to God in the Constitution. Now, obviously, the question is there a reference to God in the Constitution? The fact is that our Constitution does say, Nkosi Sikelele Afrika, Lord bless South Africa. That is there because of what the ACDP has done. If ACDP was not there, it would not have happened. Secondly, he said, if the Constitution says that we are a secular state, then state institutions would not be used for religious purposes. There are still churches that are using school facilities today. There are still Christian organizations that have campaigns, evangelistic campaigns, with tents pitched on state land, council property. Now, if the Constitution stated that you're a secular state, that would not have been the case. That would not have been allowed. We are still using public facilities. It is constitutional. If the Constitution said you're a secular state, it would have been stopped long ago. Churches would have been told that is unconstitutional. But churches have that freedom and that liberty because of what ACDP has done. I'm surprised these days when I hear people say, ACDP has not done anything for the church. Now you ask yourself a question. These very people that say ACDP has not done anything, what have they done? What have they done? Have they spoken out against abortion publicly? Have they spoken out against abortion? Have they spoken out against, these days we'll say, New World Order? They have not. And I promise you, challenge all those who are starting new political parties. Who's funding you? Where do you get your money from? Because I know the other guys who are concerned about the ACDP have money, and they're supporting these guys who want to stop the ACDP that says, we believe in John 14, verse 6. Remember, when my heart was still very sore after losing my wife, I had to say something in response to the President's State of the Nation address. And in closing, I said, the last statement I made was, the ACDP will not be part of the one world religion. Challenge all the others. I'm saying challenge them because they think they can do better. And many of them, I know, they're cowards. Okay, they're cowards. They will not be able to say some of the things I say. Tell them to stand on a public platform and say that they will not be part of the new world order or one world religion. Only the ACDP, because the one who called us wants to be the only one to save this country so that nobody will doubt that South Africa is where it is after next year because of God Almighty. We'll give him all the glory because everybody will know that this would not have been possible. Actually, I must say, sir, the Lord said to me, one of the things he's going to do, he is going to do such a work that nobody will doubt that he did it.
Let it be so.
Okay? Nobody will doubt that he did it.
Yeah.
He wants to get the glory. Let the others who want to have Freemasonry this side, homosexuality this side, ancestral worship this side, sangomas this side, they mix them together, and then after God shall have done a miracle, he is not even acknowledged. But ACDP says there is only one Savior. Yeah. We are saying that we are the only ones, and I'm sure that's why I'm saying challenge them to say it on the public platform. I can say it in Parliament, I can say it out of Parliament, I can say it anywhere. Anyway, I can say it. Okay, that was the second thing. State institutions should not be used for religious purposes. I'm saying in South Africa, state institutions are being used for religious purposes. Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure. I mean, we would not have been here if at all we were a secular state. I nearly said we would not be allowed to use these offices for religious purposes. We would not have been here.
Sure, in the first place.
Yeah, we would not have been here. Okay, so friends, ACDP has done much for South Africans, particularly the church. The third one, they said religious office bearers would not hold any office of state. Meaning I would have been disqualified.
That's why we wouldn't be here.
Many of our members would have been disqualified. So today, we are able to be in parliament, we are able to be in legislatures, we are able to be in councils, and we are going to be in government this coming year. God is going to do something that he alone can do. That is why, friends, we need to focus on him, love him, and walk righteously before him, and not learn from people who don't fear God. They do that behind the scenes. No, we need to walk in righteousness.
Right.
Righteousness. And then you'll see what our God will do for us. So it has been good for us to be in this place when people were screaming, stay out of politics, stay out of politics. And the very people who are screaming at us, stay out of politics, where are they today? They want to start a party. Now, they don't have the courage to come to the ACDP and say, you were right, we were wrong. So they won't do that. They start their own thing and they say, well, the ACDP is not doing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm saying, let's see what they can do. But the South African population, particularly the Christian population, should say, we want to hear you say it. Can you say something that the ACDP can say in front of Klaus Schwab? World Economic Forum, can you say it? We say it because we are not scared. Okay? We know greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. Yeah. So these three important things that we have ensured that state facilities are used for religious purposes. We have ensured that the religious office bearers, we pastors, we can be in politics without anybody stopping us. And we have ensured that even God is honored in the Constitution. Even though he's not completely honored, but at least there is a reference to God. There is an acknowledgement. God must bless South Africa.
Yeah.
If God does not bless South Africa, then nobody will. If God does not save South Africa, then nobody will. That is the conviction of the ACDP.
Yeah.
So we have done much for you guys. We have
Yeah.
done much for the country. And so I'm going to ask my colleague to stop, to continue with what they have done. Now, Maxwell Ngeu says, the presence of ACDP in parliament is a deterrent to the inherent system of corruption and authenticating the reference of God. Very true, Maxwell. I appreciate that. Kiwi Fruit Maluleka says the ACDP is the only party that stands for the truth. We need to be firm and more aggressive as Christians. We cannot allow the incorrect legislations to be implemented at our what? Job well done leadership. Thank you, Kiwi Fruit. I like Kiwi Fruit in any way. I like that. Thank you so much. Okay, sir. Let's hear how your contribution in influencing legislation in this place.
President, I have to, I think, also be upfront in terms of my contribution, and my contribution compared to our president and to our Honorable Steve, who's been in Parliament for these many years, is obviously negligible compared to the extensive experience that they've had and the amount of impact that they've had over the years for the ACDP. We've looked to our president as the example and continue to look to him as the example. And so we glean from him in terms of what we do. So I want to maybe just mention two things. The one, and I want to pick up from what I think it is Maxwell who actually spoke about the influence of the ACDP at Parliament, and also what a member of Parliament actually said. Now recall that during the COVID period, the ACDP was the only political party that called for safe vaccinations. They needed to be voluntary, and the contents of those vaccinations needed to be made known. So informed consent needed to be the principle by which we operate. The ACDP also, taking the leadership from our president, had also said, we cannot wait for people to be on their deathbeds before they go to hospital. There needs to be early treatment. Mm-hmm. And so we went online. We had a doctor with us who actually said some of the things that can be done, your vitamin C and your vitamin D and some of the multivitamins, and also nasal treatment that can be done to actually stop the virus from actually progressing from your nasal passages down into your lungs and into the respiratory organs. And so that's what the ACDP did. Now, in Parliament, when our president, the president of the country, Mr. Ramaphosa, said that those who say that there will be mandates in South Africa, he says there will be no mandates. Mm-hmm. The president of the country, Mr. Ramaphosa, said people will not be stopped from going to work. He said students will not be stopped from going to universities and schools. And so he says there will be no mandates. Then subsequent to that, the Minister of Labour, Minister Nexi, issued a declaration allowing employers to impose mandates which prohibited workers from going to work and also students from going to university. It was the ACDP that challenged the president, that challenged our government in terms of their policies. Now, during one of my speeches in Parliament, where we challenged, and I personally, on behalf of the ACDP, challenged the government on their policies, I was threatened with death. I was threatened with forced vaccination. And I responded by saying that nothing will happen to me beyond that which God permits. We are protected, like the president said, John 14:6 is what we stand on. We know who we trust and in whom we believe. And so because of the stance, and the ACDP was the only party that challenged government in terms of some of the regulations that were implemented, we took government to court on some of their irresponsible, unconstitutional regulations, and also prevented government from steamrolling what was obviously unconstitutional. Now, having taken that position, a member of parliament, and I won't mention who, but a member of parliament came to me after one of our parliamentary sittings, and he said to me, Honorable Thring, the ACDP must not stop what it's doing.
Sure.
He said, it is because of the ACDP. It is the ACDP that has stopped government during this period. It is the ACDP that has stopped government from going far ahead of what they were intending to do. So please, ACDP, don't stop. And so I thought, let me just also share that with you. And this obviously was a collective effort, President. It was a collective effort from the ACDP. And I can very clearly say that the ACDP was the only party that took a moral decision, a conscious decision, and a decision where we were led by our conscience, guided by our principal belief in God, based on this the ridiculous legislation in terms of even what you could wear. Slops were being banned, and certain clothing was being banned during the COVID period. All right. So that was maybe one of the instances and one of the things in terms of what the ACDP has done. But the second I want to speak about is our involvement in the changing of Section 25, the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution. Now, remember that the Red Berets were wanting to expropriate land without compensation. Yeah. In Parliament, you can recall they were shouting, give us the land, we want the land. And I believe that the ANC, the ruling party, in order to pull the rug from the Red Berets from under their feet, they decided that they were going to amend Section 25 of the Constitution. Now, I was asked to be a part of that particular process. A select committee, Section 25, amendment of the Section 25 of the Constitution Committee was appointed, and I was the member of the ACDP sitting on that particular committee. So what was it that they were wanting to do? Now, the Constitution Section 25 says that no one can arbitrarily be removed or robbed of their property, except in terms of the law of general application. And if expropriation is to take place, it must be just and it must be equitable. So the Constitution is very clear. And so the ACDP in that particular committee that sought to amend Section 25 of the Constitution, the ACDP was one of the political parties that said Section 25 of the Constitution cannot be amended, should not be amended. We were not opposed to the proper restitution of land where land needed to be restituted. But we were opposed to the amending of the Constitution, which would, in order to apply or in order to bring in the expropriation of land without compensation. The ACDP fought on behalf of South Africans to ensure that the Constitution was not amended. Now, there were other political parties, but the ACDP was one of those parties fighting to ensure that the Constitution was not amended. And we thank God that when it came to Parliament, the ANC, the ruling party, did not get the majority that they needed to amend Section 25 of the Constitution. Sadly, however, President, they found another way, which is one of the expropriation bill. They've amended the expropriation bill to allow for expropriation of land without compensation. I met with the former President Kgalema Motlanthe at the coalition meeting that was called by the Deputy President of the country. And I said, Mr. Motlanthe, I want to take my hat off to you in terms of your land, the panel that you were appointed to, the high panel that you were appointed to lead, looking at expropriation of land. And Motlanthe himself indicated that if there is no security of tenure, if land rights are not protected in South Africa, the consequences will be too ghastly to contemplate. Yeah. He looked at me and he said, sir, I agree with you. And that the ANC themselves need to read that document and apply it. So this is what the ACDP has been doing, and my little influence in the 4.5 years or so that I've been in Parliament, we continue to fight for righteousness and justice on behalf of South Africans, and on behalf of the church, and on behalf of those who are God-fearing and who fear God, and we will continue to do so. As our president said, we are not political schizophrenics.
And Bambruke also.
We are not afraid. We also see Bangbroeke nie in Afrikaans. So we stand our ground, and there are many who indicate that the ACDP punch above their weight. And we will continue to do that on behalf of our country. And we are expectant in terms of the vision, President, that God has given to you, that South Africa will be led by a righteous government, and the ACDP is waiting for that moment come 2024.
Thank you very much, DP. Thank you very much. ACDP has done much. We need to thank God for the ACDP. All those people who are just criticizing and have no solutions and are doing nothing, they need to start thinking twice and thanking God for the ACDP. On Friday, we were in Pretoria. We were protesting and saying we do not want to support this single marriage bill. It's going to complicate things. It's going to undermine our marriages, we that are married, those that are married. We want to remain husband and wives. We defend the current definition of marriage. That's so some of them stop government's evil plan to redefine marriage. Hey, you see, these are soldiers. That's what we did. Now, no other party is doing this. Do you know after this march, policemen were asking for forms.
Beautiful.
Policemen and women asking for forms. They want to join the ACDP because they know that their future will be secure. Their future will be secure. Now there we are handing the memorandum. We are handing the memorandum to the DG, the Director General of Home Affairs, the gentleman in the blue jacket, and the one next to him was the regional manager. They said it's the regional manager of Home Affairs. Those two gentlemen were there, and they got the message loud and clear. Can you see the excitement? Can you see the soldiers there? Soldiers who are saying, guys, we do not want to be lumped together with people who say we are just partners, we are just, a man can have as many wives as he wants, a woman can have as many men as he wants. I mean,
and
how
gender
are you going
neutrality.
to do that?
There's no male, no female, no husband, no wife.
You see that?
Gender neutral.
That's what they wanted to do. And because of the ACDP, that is not going to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, we are given authority. One of the things that the guys, the globalists have promised, they said, we are going to have a permanent lockdown. All right? One day we'll talk about this lockdown thing. Now, but the only thing I want to say now is that it is not going to happen under our watch. It does not matter if what the UN says. We have authority in the spirit over all powers of the enemy, over all scorpions and serpents. By the grace of God, we are going to put them under our feet. There will be no lockdown while ACDP is around. That is why you need to say to your neighbors and to your friends, stop trembling, stop being afraid. ACDP is there. Just support ACDP. Just pray for the ACDP, because as long as ACDP is there, there will be no permanent lockdown. You know that the daughter of Klaus Schwab has said, we are going to have permanent lockdown, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not. And I said, when I heard it, I said, you are going to see, whether you say that or not, we will not have a permanent lockdown in South Africa, because God has planted the ACDP here. And one of the reasons, maybe let me not talk much about a permanent lockdown. Marie is one of those also, obviously, who has been in the news. If time permits, I might say a concluding statement about this permanent lockdown that I said will not happen under our watch. We have seen how these guys have lied to people, how doctors have lied to people, how governments have lied to people. Now on says Wakker. Those who are sleeping on says no Wakker. We are wide awake. It's not going to happen again.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, it's not going to happen again. So if Marie Sugers is with us, Marie, good to have you tonight. You are one of those who have done us so good. You have blessed parents in South Africa. So tell the parents or tell ACDP family, what have you done, particularly with the Bella Bill? And how does that benefit ordinary South African parents? Over to you, Marie, and welcome.
Hi, good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, DP, and good evening to our ACDP family and all the people that are joining us tonight here. I am in Potchefstroom, Mr. President, here at the new university, Northwest University, representing the ACDP on rural education. So just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into that, but it's one of the areas that the ACDP has also made great impact on, that people may not know, that because of our advocacy and our fight in Parliament for rural communities, the Western Cape put a moratorium on the closure of rural schools. And we forced the department to acknowledge that they are closing schools without a policy. We punch above our weight, Mr. President, because we have the Holy Spirit within us. And as the DP has said, I also want to just acknowledge that the 30 years in Parliament that, Mr. President, you have played a role to blaze a trail and leave a legacy. We have a stellar reputation in Parliament. And so for us newbies, backbenchers, we are coming in into a foundation that has been laid so well by men and women under your leadership, who has lived out a reputation as hard workers in our in Parliament. Mr. President, in terms of the Bella Bill, when we went into the Bella Bill, it's important for people to understand the Bella Bill, the draft legislation comes since 2013, 2017. Of course, it is one of the major legislations that transforms the education sector. And the ACDP, from the beginning, and again, it is by the Holy Spirit. There is no way I can say, if you look at our resources in terms of research, then it is when you recognize the work that we've done in terms of analyzing, looking at the bill from a Christian worldview perspective, it is almost, I would say, with our limited resources and impossibility, that we were able to analyze this bill and find clause 41 as the hidden clause. I would call it, we called it the insidious clause that gives the minister unfettered powers to make regulations on learner pregnancy. That is the one clause. Then the other was clause 37, of course, that affects homeschooling. And then clause 27, the closure of rural schools. Those were the three main clauses that we went to war with, to raise awareness and to raise really God's army. And it is very important for people to understand that when the ACDP says, like you've said, Mr. President, we are not for sale, we do not change, we are not schizophrenic, we are not going to go in policy where what is going to give us the most vote, but that the Word of God and the Christian worldview is the foundational principles upon which we look, the lens that we look through legislation. Now, when you look at these three clauses that I've just mentioned, it undermines parental rights. And it gives the state, really, it puts the state in the position of the parents. Because when you close rural schools, you are pushing children into hostels, and those children as young as 6 are then alienated from their parents, and actually the state becomes the custodian of the child's moral and moral education, as well as their general education in terms of schooling. And secondly, when you are enforcing limitations on and strict restrictions in clause 37 on homeschooling, you are limiting the choice of parents to take their children or to teach their children at home, which a lot of parents are taking the sacrifice to teach their children at home for a variety of reasons we don't have the time to go in. But the primary reason is because parents takes very seriously raising their children in a biblical Christian worldview, and outside of what has become a secular curriculum that does not align with the majority of South Africans' beliefs around the Christian worldview and the Christian principles being part of the curriculum. Then thirdly, in terms of clause 41, which is the most insidious, is that it gives the minister the powers to issue regulations. And those regulations, we said, we can safely assume that it would be aligned with their policy. Now, the policy of the department, as it was outlined in December 2021, adopted, or rather issued, is that children be able to get sexual reproductive services or be referred for sexual reproductive services, which includes contraceptives and, where necessary, abortion. When you look at that, it is in total opposition to the Christian worldview, as well as it undermines the right of the parent, because now a teacher, a principal, an SGB member can send and refer your child for contraceptives as young as 12, for contraceptives or for an abortion, without you as a parent knowing. So the undermining of parental rights. And the ACDP took to war. We took this to war to fight for parental rights and to oppose the overreach of the state through this legislation. And because of the work that we've done on the ground to mobilize parents and to make a clear sound, because it says in Corinthians, if the trumpet makes an unclear sound, who will prepare for war? And it is we feel as the ACDP, especially in Parliament, that it is our responsibility to communicate in a clear and make a clear sound where necessary for the fight, and to promote biblical and Christian worldview to a majority country, by the way, that is not secular, but that embraces the Christian worldview. So we mobilized, Mr. President, in all 9 of the provinces. We totally opposed the department, and we opposed the ANC vehemently. And through that mobilization of a force, I should say, in the small, and I think as we go into 2024, we absolutely are endeavoring to get that force even larger around the bigger issues of fighting for the Christian worldview. Through that voice in all 9 of the provinces, and fighting for an enhanced public participation process, step by step, we united the opposition, Mr. President. And through that, the Bella Bill has been, there are certain leverage that we can say through our intervention and through the uniting of the opposition on this legislation, that we've made gains, significant gains. And that makes it impossible for any political party to ignore the homeschooling community. And we must emphasize that the majority of them are Christian parents fighting for their children to be raised in the ways of the Lord. That is the groundwork that we have done, and we are still in the process. The process is concluding next week with the Bella Bill being adopted in the committee. And I think the success story, Mr. President, we can take further in terms of the gains, and also in terms of the fight forward, because there are various things that we can that we need to advance and we need to oppose. I do not have time to go into all of them, but those are the gains through this party, Mr. President, and the legacy, I should say, of Mameshwe and yourself. And I want to emphasize Mameshwe as a woman of faith who unashamedly stood for the biblical worldview. Because of those sacrifices and that labor, we are able to courageously fight this fight and oppose legislation in the way that we do.
Thank you very much, MP Sukers, for the great work that you have done with the Bella Bill, among others. Thank you for giving parents their right to make choices for their children. If ACDP was not there, you were not there to fight that fight, parents would lose authority over their children. Government, which is a poor and a bad parent, government makes very, very bad parenting. That's why we can never allow government to parent any child, because they will make a mess of that. All right. Now she said something about Mama Mishwe. Hey, maybe let me just say one thing about her. Excellent work. When she went into the legislature, she was not interested. Even as I was not interested to come to parliament. I was not interested. It was just to obey God. I came here to obey God. She went to the Gauteng legislature in obedience to God and to her husband. Because her husband said, between 94 and 99, we have had four men representing us. The first one was fired because he stole money, he was corrupt. The second one was fired because of immorality. And obviously, we believe in biblical values. Obviously, we live right. All gentlemen who are listening to me, ladies who are listening to me, we live right in the ACDP, okay? The second man was fired for immorality. The third one, unfortunately, died in office. And the fourth one obviously completed the term. And after the first term, the NEC then said, hey, 4 men in 5 years, we must try a woman now. Because, and they tried Mamishwe. Hey, she did an excellent job. An excellent job for 10 years. An excellent job, okay? Until one day, actually, I met the husband. He's an ANC official. A man who said to his wife, I want you to go to that woman in the ACDP, that woman to mentor you. I want a wife like that woman. Imagine. It happened, okay? And if you want, one day you want the gentleman to say it in public, I'm not sure that you'll have the courage, but we met, okay? Why? Because we have had quality people. And because of these quality people, the ACDP has lifted the standard of Christian politician. We all knew, I was scared of politics because I knew people were falling. Christians were falling in politics. Even when the Lord spoke to me, the first question I asked him was, Lord, do you want me to backslide? You want me to backslide? You send me in that danger zone. You want me to backslide? But he has been good to keep me from falling, to keep him, because it is not God's will for us to fall when he places us where he wants us. Okay? We can all live for God where he placed us. If we can do it, make it in parliament, you can make it. If Joseph could make it in Egypt, he was the only one surrounded by the ungodly, you can make it. If in Babylon, anywhere where God plants you, you can make it. So as we come towards the end, obviously, the question that we were facing and that we have to face is the ACDP going to participate in this multi-party charter? Remember, this multi-party charter is not a coalition. They are drafting the rules that will govern the formation of coalitions. Now, the question we asked in the beginning was, should ACDP participate in that? Before I hear your opinion, let me remind you. When the ungodly were making regulations during COVID, we were not represented there. They locked us in our homes. They said you must not go to church. When finally, because of pressure, they allowed us to go to church, they said, zip, close your mouth, don't sing, just have an entertainer. Okay, these were the regulations. Is there any wisdom in saying, let people make regulations for me without you having a voice? I think definitely there's no wisdom in that. Okay, so we must participate in regulations, forming rules. We must participate in all this. Otherwise, you are going to be oppressed and your life, you're going to lose your freedoms. So I want to hear from you before we make a final statement. I want to hear from you. After what we have heard, how these MPs have impacted legislature. Why? Because they were not somewhere praying. They were right there where decisions were made. They were right there.
Right.
And we got these wonderful outcomes because we are there.
That's right.
Okay, you are there.
Mhm.
You are there. So, are there ACDP members who still feel that, stay away, let these guys make regulations for you? Let's hear. Marian Lotta says, we cannot participate in this agreement. It is an agreement that is trying to add more votes. Confusion. We are not insecure. Okay, what do you understand that to mean?
Well, we clearly are not insecure. So the ACDP knows exactly what it wants to do. We know exactly where we are going. So we are not insecure. But I think clearly the part that we need to look at is, should we be a part of the making of the regulations, the rules that will actually govern coalitions? The vast majority of South Africans and political strategists and pundits are actually saying that based on the surveys, we are going to be heading for a possible coalition, that the ANC is going to be getting below their threshold, all right, that 50% threshold, way below. Now, should we be a part of the drafting of the regulations or not? Now, I don't think that that speaks about our security or insecurity. The ACDP knows, we know exactly who we are, and we are secure in who we are.
There is no organization or institution in the world that is led by Christians. Christians have stepped back, and allowed the ungodly to dominate everything. Talk about sports, the ungodly. Talks about education, the ungodly. Talks about...
It's a sad fact.
It's very, very sad. Okay, it's very, very sad. Why? Because we say, let them do it. Let them do it. I don't see that in scripture. I don't want people to make decisions for me. I want to make my own decision. Okay, let's hear others before we close. We have Robert Nicol. I believe we need to take every opportunity to be an influence in the world in which we live. That's Robert Nicol. Thank you, sir. Another one. Let's hear what they're saying. Beverly Peterson. If ACDP is not there, we cannot control the outcomes. We need our voices heard all the time. We need our voices heard all the time. All right? Maybe the last one. Renee Jordan. Where will you be the most effective and fight
the righteous
fight? Okay.
Yeah.
What will be the most effective? Good question.
Good question. From the outside or right there? If you were not in Parliament at the time that the Constitution was being drafted, would we have a constitution that declares and that states that South Africa is not a secular state? Possibly not. Obviously not. But because we were there with the drafting of the Constitution, South Africa today is not a secular state, because we were there, not on the outside, but right there fighting for South Africans.
Actually, sir, I was told by some ANC members that if there was no ACDP to ensure that secular state is not included in the Constitution, then there would have been no religious political parties in South Africa.
Okay.
Like in Africa. In Africa, there are no Christian parties. You can't use the word Christian throughout the continent. Why? Because Christians were not there when the constitutions were written.
Right.
In South Africa, we are not like them. We have a Christian party. People are surprised. How did you get it right? Okay, they're asking the question, how did you get it right? All the African countries, not one of them, is a Christian party and has the word Christian. They are banned. They are not allowed. Right. In South Africa, we managed to get it right because we were there.
Yeah.
If we listen to people who said, stay away, don't go, we would be in a mess today. There would be no ACDP in South Africa. South Africa would be in a much worse state than it is today.
True.
Immorality would be happening in the streets all the time. But because we are there, there's a conscience. They say, hey, watch those guys that are watching us. They're watching us. So, friends, we have to be there in the center of whatever is happening. Tony Manuel. This is an opportunity for the ACDP voice and authority to be enforced. Tony Bayadangi, Johannes Mahohole. For the sake of taking this country forward, I'm saying you must participate and stick to our godly principles, because they want to push one world order. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it would be good. It's now about, okay, we still have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Rodi Love, best reference will be Matthew 28:19. Teaching them to obey. Okay, that's the Great Commission.
Yeah, go into all the world.
Oh, no. 19 is all authority.
Yeah. Matthew 28:19. It is that going into the world, the Great Commission.
The Great Commission, definitely the Great Commission.
Yeah.
ACDP needs to influence, but not a coalition. All right? Coalition, we are not there. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen now. Now it's a charter to draft the regulations. Mboswe Beni, Ben Solomon Mankili. I believe the ACDP must climb the 7 mountains of global influence.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, can you hear all of them? Okay. Neville Withrich. He says, I think the ACDP should participate. I think the Lord should be allowed to participate. Oh, that's interesting. You have just been talking about Christians being active. Neville, thank you very, very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are winding up. We are closing. Can you hear all of them? Our people are saying participate, participate. And when I look at the scriptures, I don't find anywhere where it says don't participate.
Yeah.
Nobody must make decisions for us. We must make decisions for ourselves.
Absolutely. We've got to be salt.
We've got to be salt
to influence.
And when these people are doing some wrong things, as they have done in the past, made many wrong things, ACDP has to be there. Say no. This cannot be right. This cannot be. This cannot be right. So, ladies and gentlemen, in short, we are not just what we believe the Lord is saying, but we have heard from our constituencies. The Christian members who are participating in these talks have said, we give you a mandate, participate in this multi-party charter. Remember, it is not a multi-party coalition. It is a multi-party charter that has the mandate to draft the regulations. This is what we want, and this we don't want. Okay, that's what the parties for. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for the mandate. We are definitely going to participate as per your mandate, and also as per doing what the scriptures are saying, to be the salt and to be the light. Jesus said, don't hide your light under the table or under the bushel, but put it there where everybody will see. So the Lord bless you. Have a good evening. Have a good week. And until we meet again next week, my co-pilot also want to say goodbye to you. Say hello to them.
Well, good night. And again, thank you for participating. And again, I want to use this, what is going to be my catchphrase, that South Africa needs the ACDP.
Definitely.
And the ACDP needs you. Become involved. Sign up with the ACDP. Let's grow what God has begun. Thank you and God bless you.
Halala, halala, ACDP, halala. The Lord bless you.